This is the Aqua 7, and at the time of release, it quickly became the #1 new release on Amazon. With an original launch price of $79.99, today it can be found for $89.90 due to popularity. This is eRock on Tech, and today we're talking about the Akanos Aqua 7. The Aqua 7 was sent to me for review, however, all thoughts and opinions are my own. I've been using the Aqua 7 now as my daily driver for a little over 1 month, and so I now have a bunch of different thoughts and opinions that I can share with you about what it's like to actually have this as your day-to-day case with high-end components. Now, let me make a few things abundantly clear. Number one, I want to make this video short, sweet, and to the point. So this will not be a dedicated 45-minute case review video where I test every single possible configuration that the case can support. I'm a one-man band. I don't have those types of resources, and on top of that, I'm just not interested in doing that style of video. Rather, I have been using this case as my daily driver for well over 30 days now, and I want to share with you what that experience has actually been like. I want to share with you the pros and cons of the case, and I also want to talk about who I think this case is really meant for, because I don't think it's for everybody. Let's get into it. Okay, by far the biggest benefit of the Aqua 7 is the value proposition. This case is absolutely phenomenal if you're on a budget, if you're looking for bang for buck, because it does come with 6 pre-installed ARGB reverse blade fans. So that means everything's pre-configured for you, everything's already wired up for you, you're getting that RGB effect, and even though some of the fans are intake and some of the fans are exhaust, you only see the front of the blades because they are reverse blade fans. So it gives you that nice aesthetic look that a lot of people are going for these days in 2024. You don't have to worry about seeing the back of the fan with wires and all of that stuff. So that's very awesome. And the thing about it is that you're getting all of this for just under $100. Now, even though this case is coming in under $100, I already know that some people will still say it's not budget enough or value friendly enough, and that's going to be a bit subjective depending on your market and what you're looking for in a case. Yes, you can absolutely get PC cases for less than the price of the Aqua 7. However, not all cases will come with pre-installed fans or fans that are RGB or fans that are reverse blade or even a total of 6 fans. I mean, some cases come pre-installed with RGB fans, but you're only getting 2 or 3 fans. This is 6 fans in total. And so again, in my opinion, I do definitely think that the value proposition of the Aqua 7 is something that's quite hard to really challenge here. Now, in addition to that, it does have that very popular and very common fish tank design. So if you want a case that allows you to see your components and see all the RGB and give you that fish tank look that is very popular now, then this case has that. However, if you're sick of that, then you're probably not going to like this case because, well, to my knowledge, this is the only form factor this case comes in. There are smaller variants of this case, like the Aqua 3, for example, but again, that is also a fish tank design. So it really will come down to, do you still like the fish tank design or are you over it? Let me know in the comment section below. Now, as I've stated, the fans are all RGB, but you have 2 different ways of controlling that RGB. The first way is by a physical button on the side of the chassis. You just push it and the color changes, push it again, the color changes again, and you can just cycle through all the different RGB effects. Now, the other way is to connect the fans to your motherboard and use your motherboard software in order to control the RGB that way. And sometimes that's a little bit easier for people because it helps you match up to your RAM or other different components inside of your PC if you're using everything through your motherboard software. It's a one-stop shop. So whether if you prefer a software solution or a hardware solution, the Aqua 7 has you covered. Okay, next up, there is a removable dust filter at the top of the case. Both of the glass panels can easily be removed without any tools. The hard drive bay is also removable as well. And overall, I would say the build quality is fairly decent. I mean, it's not the most expensive case I've ever built in, and so therefore it's also not the most premium filling case I've ever worked with, but by no means at all does the case say I'm cheap, avoid, or anything like that. It definitely feels fairly sturdy, and so I don't really have any complaints about the core design in terms of build quality. And now the last big benefit I want to point out is simply the size of the hardware that can fit in the Aqua 7. When I first got the Aqua 7, I was using the Phanteks NV5, and when I put the 2 cases side by side, the Aqua 7 was noticeably smaller, yet everything that fit inside the NV5 also fits inside the Aqua 7 perfectly fine. And so I definitely got back some extra space on my desk, and so I'm very appreciative of that. And now, again, looking at the case, it is very impressive that it can fit a full-size ATX power supply, an ATX motherboard, an RTX 4090, and even a 360 AIO up top if I chose to do so. Now, in my build configuration, I decided to use an air cooler simply because I do believe most people probably going for this budget will likely be using an air cooler. Also, not to mention, an air cooler configuration here will be the worst temperature setup, so I can share that with you. So if you are planning to go with a water cooling setup, then ideally your temperatures will be even better, at least on the CPU side of things. And now let me talk about some of the things that I'm not too happy with when it comes to the Aqua 7. Number one, it can be a bit noisy, and that is because the bottom of the chassis does in fact have a mesh panel all the way around. Obviously, this supports intake to help get air into the case. However, the downside of that is that you can also hear your other components inside the case. And so I can hear the fan spinning a little bit louder. I can also hear my GPU at times. I can also hear the air cooler at times, a little bit more so than I would in something like the Phanteks NV5, for example. And whenever I checked some of the Amazon reviews, this was the most common complaint I saw on there, was that, hey, it's a little bit on the noisy side. But by no means at all did that prevent me from enjoying the case or enjoying the build or anything like that. It's totally usable. After all, if you're gaming and if you're using a headset, you're not going to hear it. Now, arguably the biggest complaint I have is the bottom fans. Let me explain. Yes, it is nice that we get 3 bottom fans pre-installed, pre-wired, all the things. However, if you are using an ATX motherboard, you will have to remove the bottom 3 fans in order to access any of the connections at the bottom of that ATX motherboard. That was a little bit of a nuisance because in a lot of situations, you know, you build everything on the motherboard first and then you put the motherboard inside the case and then you wire it. Well, in this particular case, the Aqua 7, if you do that, once you put your motherboard inside that case, you cannot install any of the cables to the bottom connections of the motherboard without taking out the bottom 3 fans first. If you can, it's going to be a very tight fit and you might break something or rip something. Anyway, I wouldn't recommend it, so just plan to take out the bottom 3 fans during your build. That was by far my biggest headache. The other headache with the case is that because it is such a compact mid-tower, the cable management's not that great. I did struggle to get the back of the case on. I had to really push down the cables. There's not a lot of room for cable management. And even though all the fans are pre-wired for you, even the manufacturer does not do the greatest job at cable management. It looks absolutely hideous back there, but once the panel's on, you're not going to see it. So out of sight, out of mind type of deal. So it's not a big deal. Anyway, with that being said, there's not a lot of room for cable management, and it was definitely a tight fit getting that back panel back on the case. Okay, one aspect of the Aqua 7 that I'm a little bit 50-50 on is the I/O. In my experience, most cases that I have owned typically have the I/O at the top of the chassis. Occasionally, you can find it at the bottom of the chassis, but again, in my experience, it's usually at the top. Now, with the Aqua 7, all of the I/O is on the side of the case, right below the main glass panel. Now, there are some pros and cons to this. The main con to this is simply retraining yourself to get used to reaching for the power button in that area as opposed to the top. I cannot tell you how many times I have walked into my room reaching for the power button at the top because I'm so used to it, just to find out, oh yeah, there is no power button up here, and then I have to reach around or walk around and hit the button. Not a big deal, I know, but I'm just saying this will bother some people. Now, the main benefit here is that when you're actually sitting at your desk, all of your I/O is within an arm's reach. You don't have to overly stretch, you don't have to stand up or anything like that. Everything is right there while you're sitting at your desk. And so from that standpoint, it is a big benefit, but there is a little bit of a behavior change that you're probably going to have to get used to. And now I ran some tests in the Aqua 7 to see how hot my 7800X3D would get and how hot my RTX 4090 will get. Okay, so I ran Cinebench R23 on a 10-minute multi-core test, and as you can see, we maxed out at 90.1 C with an average of 86.5 C, and of course the other numbers are on the screen for you if you care more about those categories. And for the people who care, the final multi-core score was 16,427. Next up, I tested with Port Royal at 1440p ultra settings, and the RTX 4090 maxed out around 71C, and the 7800X3D maxed out around 69C. Next up, I tested Furmark on the 4K preset, and again, the RTX 4090 hit 71C, but on the hotspot we saw up to 83C. Next up is the Call of Duty Black Ops 6 beta, and as you can see, my RTX 4090 is sitting at 70C, and my 7800X3D is also hovering around 70 to 71C. Also, please keep in mind, I am using Curve Optimizer with a -25 offset. And for my final test, I'm using Halo Infinite. Again, as you can see, the 7800X3D is sitting at 71C, and the RTX 4090 is around 66 to 67C. Okay, so here's my final thoughts on the Aqua 7. Number one, yes, the 7800X3D did run a little bit toasty. I am used to having temperatures lower than that. And yes, the temperature did negatively impact the performance of the 7800X3D from a clock speed perspective. Typically speaking, I can enable Curve Optimizer, set it to -25 or -30, and usually my temperatures will be around 64C, and I can see about a 50-50 on the megahertz clock speed. Now with the air cooler in the Aqua 7, as you can see, I was peaking over 70C, and I was never really hitting 5 gigahertz. And so you can make an argument there that I did see some detriment to my overall performance. But also, that's the beauty about the 3D Vcache. You don't have to worry too much about the clock speed, but as gamers, I know we like to see those higher clock speeds, but it is still usable for sure, absolutely. And if you're not happy with the temperatures or the clock speed of your CPU in the Aqua 7 with an air cooler, again, you can switch it out and upgrade to a 360 AIO, which is fully supported with the Aqua 7. The next thing I want to point out here is that while the Aqua 7 does support a 4090 like mine, it is an incredibly tight fit. My 4090 is extremely close to one of those intake fans. It's not touching, thankfully, but it's very close, and so it is a tight fit, but nonetheless, it does still fit. Overall, I think the Aqua 7 is a pretty good case. I think it's an easy recommendation for the budget PC builder, an easy recommendation for the mid-range PC builder, and a questionable recommendation for the high-end PC builder. Look, if you're like me, and if you're used to building in high-end premium quality cases, chances are you might be a little bit disappointed with the Aqua 7. But if you're somebody who's on a budget, I think the Aqua 7 is a home run for you. You get the fish tank look. You get 6 RGB fans pre-installed that are reverse blade. And should you have larger components, the case can fit it, and it is one of the smaller ATX form factor cases I have ever worked in personally. So I think it has a lot going for it. Now, the cable management could be better. The front IO is, for me, 50-50, and it is a little bit noisy. And a part of me does wish I tried it with a 360 AIO because I'm not too happy with the air cooling results, but at the same time, you may think the air cooling results are totally fine. I'm genuinely curious to know what you think, so let me know in the comment section below. Drop a comment, hit the like button. If you're new, get subscribed. Thanks so much for your time. And until next time, E-Rock out.